Hi and welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to show you how I went about making a dice tower. I really like this design because it's one of those things where you can actually change its height as well as its overall appearance. Just make sure you watch all the tips and tricks that I have throughout this whole video. The other thing is that if you're new to this channel, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do so. And if you haven't hit the bell, make sure you ring it so that you'll get notifications when my latest video comes out. Any questions, as always, feel free to ask them down below and I will do my best to answer them for you. Have fun with it and I'll see you later. Bye. Here are pictures of the two towers together. The taller one is what I'm going to call the Cleric Tower, and the shorter one is the Dwarven Tower. The difference between these two is basically your overall height. So what you need for your Cleric Tower is a classic size Pringles can, and what you're going to want if you want to do the Dwarven Tower is one of those half-size cans that you can also find at the same place you'd find a classic can. Once you get all those pulled together, you can see that each tower sort of has its own appearance. The Cleric Tower is definitely a more streamlined, smoother appearance, and the back part of the tower actually has the base sides wrapped around it, so it's also curved instead of squared off as it is with the Dwarven Tower for the dice tray base. The other difference is the paint and details added to these individual towers. So I will be explaining how this all happens and how it gets done for each tower. Keep in mind you are, for the Cleric Tower, going to need to jump to a different video for that painting technique, as it was just too long to add both painting techniques when the one's pretty much already been done. So hang tight and we'll get moving with this one. As mentioned before, you're going to want that Pringles can, and along with the Pringles can is a styrofoam cup. What you're going to do is nest that cup inside the can, taking a pencil, just draw around the edge where the two meet up most securely. You're going to remove the cup then and cut it off where you've drawn that line. However, do not throw out the bottom part of the cup because all of that is going to get put to use. Then what you're going to do is take your Pringles can and find that UPC symbol, and that's what I use to help form a door to let the dice out once they go down the can. So carefully cut that out with your X-Acto knife, and now you have an opening at the base of your tower that will help the dice come out and roll into the dice tray base. The first thing you're going to do to work on getting the mechanisms ready inside the tower is first make that ramp. So go back to the bottom part of the cup that you chopped off and carefully slice off the very base of the cup. You are going to use that circular piece later on, so again, be careful when you're cutting that off. But what you're left with is this collar shape. What you want to do is tuck that into the can, make sure it fits nicely as you want it to, and then mark where you see it poking through the opening at the bottom of the can. Take it back out, trim out that piece so that it has this opening to it, and then what you're going to do is roll it out so it's as flat as possible, and then create these slope cuts to either side so it starts making a diagonal dip from its base. So you can see here is that shape that I am talking about. Then what you want to do is use your Pringles can, trace it over a piece of cardboard, corrugated cardboard if you have it, and then you're going to need to hone it down just a little bit so it'll fit inside the can. Once you have it the right shape, you're going to hot glue with your low temp hot glue gun the formed collar that you have that has the angled slope to it now. So you're going to glue that onto your cardboard piece, and then from there you're going to flip the collar piece over and put it onto a piece of the Dollar Tree styrofoam, and you're going to trace that around to get a circle. This doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be filed down, this is going inside, it is going to be hidden. Once you have that circle cut out, hot glue that on top of the sloped piece of the collar shape, and then you are going to put a dab of hot glue inside your Pringles can and carefully put the ramp inside the can, making sure that the lowest point of the ramp is facing out towards the door. The next step is to take a piece of that Dollar Tree foam, and you're going to cut out a size of 1 inch by 3 inches of a strip that will fit inside the door opening, and you're going to tuck it in so as a test fit. And then what you want to do is, once you know it's in there and it's fitting how you want it to, bevel the one end that is going to be sticking out so that you have a nice slope to it, and then you're going to put it back in and glue it in place with a hot glue gun. The next thing you want to do is pick up that circle that was cut off from the bottom of the styrofoam cut, and you're going to cut that in half. Then going into the can, you're going to take those two half circles and hot glue them onto either side of that ramp that you just put in. Make sure when you do put in those two half circles that you put them in on a slope so that it will help guide the dice in and down towards the bottom of the ramp. Now take a strip of the foam that measures 1 inch by 2 inches. You're going to cut off a slope of the foam from the back part because that's going to get smoothed up against the back part of the can. Have the edges meet for the 2 ramps, this one and the 3-inch one, and you're going to hot glue everything in there. Once everything gets hot glued into place, you're going to basically work from a bottom-up approach for the mechanisms. You're going to want to take out a paint mixture of Mod Podge, black paint, half and half equal parts, and you're going to start painting the inside of your can. Now here you want to make sure you get everything painted up well, and now we're going to move on to the mechanism parts that are going to help the dice keep moving back and forth inside the tower as they roll down and out. To get the back and forth action going on in the dice tower, what you're going to do is trace again the Pringles can and hone down half of a circle's worth so that it'll fit inside the can towards the top part of the can. And what I did with these half circles is you're going to force it into a curved shape, and then when you go to hot glue it inside the can, you want to make sure that the curve of the circle is meeting up with the curve of the can, and have it so that the straight edge of the half circle is facing in towards the center and sloped down. This will encourage the dice to keep moving down towards the bottom opening of the dice tower. Then you're going to use that Mod Podge black paint mix again. Paint this particular ramp and any parts of the can that you can reach, but do not paint all the way up to the very top, because what you want to do is now hot glue in the cup that fits in the top part of the Pringles can. Once the cup is glued in, you're going to take that second half circle that you used from the tracing of the Pringles can, and you're going to put that in the bottom of the cup itself, making sure that the straight edge is facing directly across from where you can see the edge of the previous ramp. However, you want the ramps not to be next to each other. You want at least 3 inches between the two. So you're going to put in that second ramp into the cup, and then again you're going to paint it with the black paint mixture, and then finally you will move up to that very last ramp. However, what you're going to need to do is trace the outside of the cup this time, because now you have a size difference. Again, fine tune it, get that straight edge going towards the center of the cup, make the cardboard curve a little bit before you hot glue it into the top, and don't forget to make sure that it slopes down. Once you have that all in place and hot glued, then you can finish painting everything else inside of what is now basically your tower with what you have of that black paint and Mod Podge mix. For the dice tray part of this base, what you're going to do is cut out a piece of corrugated cardboard that measures 8 inches by 3 inches. Then you are going to take that Dollar Tree foam and you're going to put that on top of that cardboard piece, measured out the same dimensions, and hot glue the two of them together. Once they are together, you're going to now take your tower and you are going to attach it to the base. When it comes to the Cleric's tower, at this point you can cut off the back corners that are sticking out from underneath the can. In the case of the Dwarven tower, what you can do is keep those back corners on there. And now what you move on to doing is you're going to create a side panel to the ramp that is sticking out from the door of the bottom of your tower. To make it easy, just take a simple piece of the foam, push it up against the tower itself, and take a pencil and draw where that slope of the ramp is. And you'll find that you can cut away a little triangular piece that you can then attach to the side of that ramp to give it a more solid appearance. You're going to want to do the same thing to the other side so that you end up with this nicely finished off ramp as opposed to a floating piece of foam sticking out from the door. And at this point you can also paint some of that Mod Podge mix onto the ramp itself now that you have the side pieces installed. To create the top, you're going to trace the cup outside at the top of the tower onto a piece of corrugated cardboard, and once you have that cut out, you are now going to take the Dollar Tree foam, put that on top, trace that as well, so that you can glue the new piece of foam onto the piece of cardboard. Once the two pieces are attached to each other, you're going to go back, find the center of your circle, and cut out a square shape as pictured here. Once you have your square cut out so that your dice can actually go through your tower, what I started doing was adding the brick pattern onto the foam, and in this case I just drew lines down and then went back in by hand and added in the brick texture. You can also add in a little border panel to around the square like I did here as well. That is completely up to you as to what you want to do with that. For the border, I did do that on the Dwarven tower. I did not do it on the Cleric's tower. So again, your personal aesthetic, do what you want to do with that piece. Once you have the detail put onto the top, what I then did is hot glued it to the very top of that styrofoam cup, and now your top is assembled to the tower. I wanted this tower to have a place for the dice to rest, so I created a balcony concept to go around the midsection of the tower before it starts to flare out where the styrofoam cup is. To do this, you are going to need to take 1-inch square pieces of the Dollar Tree foam, bisect them in half so that you're going to end up with these right-angled side triangles. You then will take these triangles, find your center point above your door, and you're going to glue these around the top where the Pringles can is, and you're going to space them 1 inch apart from each other. I just had this piece of foam that was cut to 1 inch as a guide marker. It helped so I could draw a line, mark where I needed to put it, and then keep moving around to completely. And you'll see you get almost like this sort of like dog-like collar at the end result when you have all these triangles hot glued onto the top part of the Pringles can just under the styrofoam cup. While you could feasibly wrap this around with that foam, what I prefer to do, just because I like the detail that happens at the very end of this piece, I will glue individual bricks around this entire piece, and I make sure that the bricks that I cut out of the Dollar Tree foam are various sizes and shapes in terms of rectangles and squares. To me, I just like the way this gives it a more textured, more visually interesting look to the sides of the tower. You can also have some fun and make it so that some bricks are shallower than others, so you get a sort of divoted in or raised out appearance to some of the bricks as they line up against each other. And you are going to glue these on with your low temp hot glue gun. For the shield and hammers, I did use these files that I found on Thingiverse and used our 3D printer to get those printed out. However, you really can use any other little bits of weapons or shield that you might have lying around left over from miniatures, or just that you might come across from children's toys, that type of thing. Think outside the box with this because these really do add a pop of interest to your tower, and make sure you add them on as you build it up, because what you want to be sure of is that as you're building this, that it has a balanced sense of where they are located. So I first put the hammers on around the door, and then after the door I got up to the balcony area, and first you have to take care of the balcony before you can keep going with adding in where I put the other bricks and the shield. At this point, before I started work on the balcony, I did put the sides onto the dice tray section of this tower. So you see you have the strips measured out here. I did on purpose make sure that the strips that were on the width of the dice tray were longer than I would need, because when it comes time to attach them to the lengths of the side pieces, I wanted to be sure there was actually to be able to trim off so that I had a nice smooth transition between the two pieces. Now what I made sure to do before gluing anything on was to add on the brickwork texture that I wanted for my sides. However, you can do whatever you choose to do with these strips, whether you want it to look like cobblestone, whether you want it to be more measured, evenly outsized pieces of bricks like squares or rectangular pieces. Whatever you decide to do, do it before attaching, because it is very hard to try and add this in to the interior part of the dice tray once you have these glued on. When everything is glued into place, you just want to make sure that things are flush and measured up against each other. Carry over the brick or cobblestone or stone look, whatever it is you've done to your sides, to both sides of the piece and up and over, so it gives it a more cohesive look to the texture and the effect that you're trying to create for your panels. For the balcony, what you're going to want to do is take a piece of foam 1 inch by 2 inches, and then I took a piece of paper and measured out what's basically a trapezoid piece that is going to fit between the support pieces that you have already glued onto the tower itself. So you're going to need, depending on how many supports you have, so many trapezoid pieces for the spacing in between. In this case, I needed 8 for my Dwarven tower. So get 8 of those cut out, and then I also just nipped off a little curvature to the bottom smallest edge of the trapezoid just to make sure that it would adjust nicely to the can itself. Once I got all those pieces put around, what I did as a means to act as a bumper for where the dice are is I took very thin strips of the foam and I would hot glue it over the seams of where the trapezoids would meet up, and that acts as a means to keep the dice from pushing or rolling over onto each other once they're on the dice tower. After you get that on, what I then moved on to are the 2 different types of options that I created for the sides of the balcony. In this case, yes, both appear on the Dwarven tower. However, I changed my mind for the Dwarven tower and added a different feature. So you're going to notice the paint pictures do change a little bit, but keep in mind we are focusing just on the sides of the balcony. So the first go about, what I did was cut out smaller trapezoid pieces and used these to go around the corners of where the trapezoids met up. And once those pieces were on, I then took toothpicks and use them as a bumper so that the dice wouldn't roll through between the two smaller trapezoids next to each other. And then from there, what you do is just make sure that everything is attached securely and nicely to each other. And in this case with these is I made sure to put in a layer of just straight Mod Podge to give it some extra strength. As for the second approach, what you do in this case is you take a 1/2 inch by inch strip of foam and cut it in half. Then what you do to just one of those halves is bevel the edge so that when you attach them together, you're going to put the hot glue on the beveled edge and then line up the other square where the beveled edge is, and it gives you the kind of angle that you need to wrap around the corners of each trapezoid piece. Now I put these all together separately before attaching to the tower. I also painted them separately from the tower because I did find out having these pieces off before painting made painting the tower a lot easier, so I would recommend doing that as well. Once the hot glue is set, what I did then is take just some basic toothpicks and I put them between the two edges of the end cap pieces. And you can attach these with just some clear Elmer's glue. I found this was a better way of doing it, so it was a little bit more seamless and you didn't have to worry about hot glue poking out from the sides. So once you get those on, make sure that glue completely dries before you go back around and add in the paint details onto the toothpicks as well. And in this case, the paint that I used is the same paint that I'm going to be using for the accent color coming up as explained later on. So just keep that in mind for these corner cap pieces. For the details at the top of the tower, what you want to do is take 2 strips of foam measuring 1 inch by a 1/2 inch, fuse them together using the hot glue gun, and then you are going to bevel the side of one of your edges so you have that nice sloped down look to this piece of foam. And then you're going to go around and place these evenly around the top of the tower. I use the trapezoids underneath as a means of placing one of those per trapezoid edge, and it gave it a more balanced look to it doing it that way. In between those pieces, what you will need is a square inch piece of foam that, in the case of the Cleric's tower, what you do is line them up evenly with the tops of these pieces. For the Dwarven tower, you drop it down a little bit so they sit lower than those top pieces, and that's going to start establishing the tower's top edge for you. Once those pieces are in, you can continue putting on those little bricks by brick by brick, moving up the sides of your tower up to where you're finally meeting those top details in the tower. Then be sure to attach your shield at the center point above the opening of your dice tower. And when it comes to the Cleric's tower, what I did was just take some jewelry beads and put them on top of those thicker pieces of foam at the top of the tower to give it some more visual interest. I did not, however, do this on the Dwarven tower. As I mentioned earlier, to get the painting details for the Cleric's tower, what you're going to want to do is go over to my video. It is the mossy stairs technique. Those are the paints that I used in the order. However, just do not do a black wash at the end. You're going to do the black wash as mentioned before, and when it comes time to finishing up, you do a dark brown wash like I do as well to the Dwarven tower in this case. So use those instructions. Link is above you. Make sure you use those to paint your Cleric's tower. Let's take a look at how I did the rainbow sandstone for the Dwarven tower, however. I'm breaking the paints up into 2 groupings of dark colors and light colors. So pictured here are the order of appearance for the dark colors that I used for getting the rainbow sandstone started for the Dwarven tower. You are going to take the gray color and you are going to use a sponging technique to cover your entire tower with this color gray. After the gray, you move on to using the green, again sponging this on. I use my cosmetic wedge, of course. And when you are done with the green, you move on to a dark navy blue color. After the navy blue, you move on to a dark purple color. Are you starting to get a little scared yet? I know this looks weird, but trust me on this one. You're going to wrap it up with the final dark color of a red paint, and again sponge around with that. And yes, these colors do need to be there for this rainbow sandstone appearance, and yes, you want everything to dry entirely before moving on to the next step in painting. These are the two colors that I'm labeling my light colors. So you're going to first start with that buttery yellow, and you're going to go around and sponge that over the entire tower itself. You may find you're going to need to take a brush as well and kind of do a little bit of dry brushing in some areas just to make sure everything's getting covered nicely. You don't want it to be a thick painting cover. You want it to be like a dry brush technique with this yellow. Allow that to dry just a little bit before moving on to that second color, and same idea, go around with a sponge and again use the paintbrush if needed to get into some smaller nooks and crannies with these lighter colors. And again, you want this to dry completely before we move on to doing further detail work. Once that last coat is dry, what I did is I went back with this metallic ruby and I added some details to the shield as well as to the hammers at the bottom by the door and along sides of the ramp. You really can do whatever you want with this. If you choose to add a metallic to highlight just some interesting features to your tower, or you can opt to keep them stone-like as I did with the Cleric's tower. I did not put any metallic details on that tower because I wanted to have more of an austere appearance to it. So this is left up to interpretation on your part as well. The last thing you're going to do with paint is to do a dark brown, very thin wash on your tower to make sure you're bringing out a couple of those details that might have been lost with the various layers of paint. But again, make sure this is a very thin wash and do not be heavy-handed with this. You're just using it to highlight some of those deeper grooves and indentations. You don't want to darken this tower up completely using a wash. I wasn't very heavy-handed with the dry brushing in this case. I really used it more just to highlight the edges of some of the stones, especially at the top parts of the tower. But take a very light dry brush and go around your tower using this parchment color for both of those towers, I will say that. And again, it doesn't make a huge pop of color. What it does, it just highlights those edges just a little bit more to heighten the overall look of the stone. When every last thing is dry, go back with some Mod Podge matte and coat your entire tower with this as a protective coating. I do recommend the Mod Podge in this case because it's a little bit more thorough in making sure every little nook and cranny is covered, especially in that dice tray area. But this is your final look for these towers. Again, the Cleric and the Dwarven tower, they do sort of spin off each other in some of the concepts, or they have the same idea for other concepts in this build. But I hope it gives you an idea of where you can go with your own dice towers and riff off of this. And as always, please feel free to share them with me. Want to be sure that you also see this in action, so here's a nice little video clip for you for the very end. Thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate it, and I will see you later.
Well, we won't be lacking for bloopers. Is she recording? Oh, no. Yes, but no. Not to self. Not for the face. I have such a case of the Mondays. It's not even funny. And my hands are aching already, and I have so much to do with my crochet stuff. Ah! I honestly think I jinxed myself with the whole, ooh, rainy days make for a great screen background, because for the past 4 videos, it's been raining every single time I want to do the video intro. Did it to myself. Jinx! Can you just focus for, oh my god. Yelling at my camera like I have to do with the kids. To give them a little something, and I'm rambling, and I'm going on, and I grew a tail, and hello. Reboot! I need to get off my rambling jag. I'm literally this tired. I could just zone out. Hey, Booga. You want to say hi? No? What do you think? What are you doing? You're chasing a raindrop on the other side of the window. My cat's not very smart. You know what's funny? I'm so short, this is probably how I look to a lot of people from this angle.